Delighted to say Tom Slater, editor of Spike.net, is still with me, although been stum for the last little while, getting other guests in. But I do want to bring you back in on what Kinsey was just saying about the royals. It's not the biggest story of the day. I get that. Front pages of some newspapers, though. Where is Prince Andrew going to live? All the stuff about his titles. We've had Ed Davey, the Lib Dem leader, yesterday talking about having a parliamentary early day motion, or a day in Parliament, having a debate about Prince Andrew and his titles. I mean, I can't think of anything more of a waste of MP's time, personally. But how concerned are you about this scandal?
Well, I think it's very damning for Prince Andrew. Of course it is, not least because of the provable lies he's told about his associations with Epstein, how close it was, at what time, when did he distance himself, and so on and so forth. As you say, strenuously denies any allegations of criminal wrongdoing, and even though he is an idiot and he is the Duke of York just about, he's still, deserving of due process and shouldn't be presumed guilty.
He literally has not been. He says he never met Virginia Giuffre, and if he did have sex with her, she would have been 17, perfectly legal in this country.
And it's one of those things where that it's important to stress that, because I think there is a little bit of kind of damning him entirely. But he's obviously still become an enormous headache for the monarchy. He's obviously still taken the public for fools in terms of statements he's made which haven't lined up with what actually took place. And there's some quite serious allegations doing the rounds at the moment in the press, in Virginia Giuffre's posthumous memoir and so on, that he was enlisting private detectives or social media bots to try and come up with dirt on Virginia Giuffre. So for a woman he claims never to have met, he seems to have been quite interested in trying to discredit her. But it was still one of those things where the question now is what it means for the institution. He's clearly, there's no love lost between him and King Charles, which is obviously a big part of why they're dealing with him in a lot firmer way than obviously the late Queen did, Andrew being a favourite effectively. And unfortunately, because we live under a monarchy, we're all dragged into it. So it's one of those things where suddenly it becomes a political issue.
Well, that's
suddenly
it. On one level, I don't care. I don't care where Prince Andrew. I really object to the fact that his building he's been allowed to live in all this time is on the Crown estate, and they've got a duty of care to us as taxpayers to actually maximise the rent. But also, this Windsor estate is just full of these huge big mansions just being handed out to you and here and there. But then if you say you can't get a normal job, I don't know who would want to employ Prince Andrew other than some dodgy Kazakhstan billionaire or the Emir of Kuwait or wherever. I mean, but really, what can he do of any use? He was a hero in the Falklands, no doubt at all, but what has he done usefully for us since then? Okay, he was a trade envoy. No, he just has a title. He just had a title that meant that people would want to they would turn up. It was that simple.
And the trade envoy thing could be something where the sort of next Prince Andrew scandal stuff. There was a good piece in the Sunday Times there about just how little he was actually pulling in for UK PLC, but how many private jets and helicopters and parties in far-flung places with interesting people.
But also some question marks over the benefits that he personally got, because he seems to have an awful lot of money for someone with no obvious source of income. Because
formally he wasn't paid for that trade envoy role, but I think we all understand maybe there were other sources of money that came along with it, and houses being bought by foreign dignitaries at way above the market price. There's all these things going on, and I think this is the issue, is that this is the problem with I think the kind of the monarchists and the royalists have to contend with, is the fact that because the Queen was so beloved across the country, and I think even Republicans, many of us had a lot of respect for her.
To be fair to the late Queen, she did put duty and country above anything else.
Exactly, but that was always going to, as soon as she passed away, it was always going to raise big questions. First and foremost, because Charles obviously does not command that level of public respect or popularity. There was a bit of a bounce afterwards, as far as I think people felt sympathy for him, and he's obviously taking on the mantle of the role, and that brings a certain authority to you, but that's already starting to dip. And then also the whole Prince Andrew issue, which, as one person described it in the papers over the weekend, was like a kind of unexploded bomb left for King Charles's reign.
It's a fair point that Kinsey Schofield made, though, that actually it was very unfair for them to leave this for the King.
Exactly, because it could have been something that, the Barnacle was off the boat before this even began. But it's a reminder, isn't it, that this is the nature of monarchy. Just because one individual in that family line was brilliant doesn't mean any of her children are going to be able to step up.
But as I keep pointing out to people morning is, you can't complain if you get a dud.
Yeah.
Because that's what you've signed up to.
That's how it works.
That's what you signed up to. Well, if we get a dud when we elect a leader, then we get rid of them. That's what we do with prime ministers. We get rid of them.
No more grace in favour of homes and things. Those
talking of duds, everyone in this current Labour government, let's talk about the stuff that's actually impacting our lives and how we live and our actual homes, in terms of, local hotel in my area is now an asylum hotel. People having to live next door to people who are, illegally entered this country, paid people, smugglers. Do they have a criminal record? Where are they from? Ooh, we don't know. We have no idea, and yet free to walk on our streets, being funded by us. Lots of outcry over this, of them being wherever they are in houses of multiple occupancy. Hotels being a big focus. We've got some 32,000 people in hotels, and yet the government says they're going to get them out originally by 2029. Now they're talking by the end of the year. And the latest announcement is 2 different army barracks, one in Scotland and Inverness, and one in East Sussex in the south of England. From next month, they're going to house small boat migrants, but it's 900 of them. Right? So is it slightly more than the BB Stockholm? Was that 400? I think when that BB Stockholm barge opened, I think on that very day more than 400 arrived when they opened it, and it didn't last for long. Got 100,000 in the backlog, got 32,000 in hotels. I mean, the question I'm asking everyone is, what do you think should be done with the migrants who are in hotels? Does this in any way provide a solution to the problem?
Oh no, of course not. It's just window dressing. It's just the attempt to look as if you're doing something. I mean, just this year, we've already beat last year's total in a calendar year.
Come on, for arrivals.
Small boats arrivals.
Come on, let's give a little bit of a round of applause.
Since Labour came to power, I mean, it was back in August that they went over 50,000 in the space of about a year of them being in office. So the idea that, we've got 900 places and maybe we'll get it up to 10,000. Again, you're barely touching the sides of the last year, let alone people who will still be kind of caught up in the system and still waiting for responses and still lodging legal complaints.
And these numbers,
we all know this. It's enormous.
They are huge numbers.
And that's because people in this debate will often say, well, illegal migration is tiny in relation to legal migration. Why are you focusing on it? These are still huge numbers, and also
by the way, the legal migration is a problem too, but in a different way.
People are concerned about both. You can walk and chew gum at the same time, but also the issue of illegal migration in particular, and is that you're really kind of selecting potentially for some real wrong-uns. If you're basically saying, if you can pay a people smuggler and are willing to make that dangerous crossing, you can come here and it'll be quite difficult to get rid of you. Yes, there'll be some people who are trying to take advantage of that because they do just want to come and work and get on and whatever. But there's also going to be a lot of people who are just fleeing charges in other countries, like the guy who got done for sending death threats to Nigel Farage, or because
who had 15 convictions
15,
in Sweden?
17, something like that.
And I mean, what's 15 or 17 between friends?
No, exactly, and there are so many cases like that. If you have porous borders, you can't count on who's going to nip through them.
And again,
and
we know Robert Jenrick, the Shadow Justice Secretary, he has pointed out that when he was in the Home Office that he was certainly told by security forces that they know at least 5 people. I mean, come on, that would touch who arrived who were terrorists, who were basically. But we know one of the policies with ISIS, when ISIS was being basically shut down and destroyed in Syria and Iraq, they basically just started making their way west through Europe. The plan was to, have your terror cell back here, and many say that, London is the epicenter for this. It is absolutely mind-blowing. We also talked a bit earlier about this, but a charity bankrolled by the Home Office has been highlighted by The Sun, using taxpayers' cash, putting a positive spin on migration to school children. Migrant Help is the name of the organisation. I know. I wonder what they do. They actually had a multi-million-pound contract, and I mean a 10-year, £235 million deal back in 2019, which has now ballooned to £385 million. I mean, this is a huge sum of money to advise asylum seekers and help them access housing. Bearing in mind that most of the people they're referring to as asylum seekers are actually illegal arrivals. Most people have no right to be here. Don't believe all that nonsense that most people on appeal win. No. Seriously, they don't win. What happens is they just basically get granted leave to remain because they can't get rid of them. Because they don't know where they're from, or they haven't got a deal with that country. So when you're told most of these people do get to stay, these people have already been rejected by Germany and Belgium and Sweden and everything. They know that they're dodgy, and I'm sorry, I just do not accept this. But this charity is going into schools now. They have a nationwide schools programme paid for by you and me to have our children indoctrinated about basically how great it is to basically offer free assemblies and workshops and exercise, asking kids to imagine they have 5 minutes to flee their home, and basically to talk about encouraging people to have a positive attitude and awareness of migration. I mean, but we're not talking about people arriving here who've just fled their home in being bombed by Assad, you know, in Syria, you know, in the day. We're talking about people leaving France.
Yeah. Have you not got sympathy for people trying to flee France, you know?
I often flee France at the end of a very long ski holiday when I've done too much après, and then I am fleeing France, yes.
Not usually via the dinghy, I presume.
Not usually via the dinghy. I don't know if my tummy would cope with that after the excesses.
That's the only thing stopping it. It's quite
most people
it's
in this country...
quite a high price as well for quite a low-grade mode of transport as well. £1,000.
I mean, I'm amazed, given the lack of security at our airports now, that these people can't just get flights over, to be honest with you.
There is that. But this charity, though, it's a reminder that there are so many people who are, shall we say, benefiting from the dysfunction of the government. It's kind of, the asylum thing's kind of become a bit of a grift for various different people. So you've got these big charities which, because the government wants to just do things quickly, or they don't think about it, they don't bother to read the contracts that they themselves sign, they end up giving huge amounts of money to people to run a helpline or to do whatever. Meanwhile, some of that money is used, or at least that organisation is going into schools and propagandising to the nation's youth in a way that no one asked them to. You've then got the whole asylum hotels issue. There's obviously the big companies who have always been, you know, questions have been asked about how effective they are and reputable they are, but, you know, the Sercos, the so on and so forth, who do loads of kind of outsourcing for the government. You've also got places like the Britannia Hotel. That was where the Canary Wharf protests were taking place.
You went along to some of those.
Yeah, and that's an interesting one because that's...
As a journalist, I'm just...
No, exactly, I wasn't a participant. But there was a hotel chain which was winning all the wrong kinds of awards, worst customer service, people constantly hating on it. 2020 comes around, obviously the business is completely cratered by lockdown, and then they find a way to make a virtue out of that by taking all this. So it's one of those things where this issue, the only people who are really benefiting from it, in my view, are a lot of these companies and these failing businesses who, because the government is so dysfunctional, because it doesn't bother to work out if it's even getting value for money as well, they can get an awful lot of money out of the public purse for presiding over this crisis.
And there are a lot of people making a lot of money. And when you look at the sums, you're not talking about a few £1,000s here and there. You are talking about multi-million pound, and in some cases multi-billion pound contracts. We know the cost of housing asylum seekers and illegal migrants is now ballooning to 15 billion a year. I mean, that's a lot of money. That's the sort of, you know, part of the savings that the Chancellor's are going to try and get by taxing us all a lot more in a month's time in the budget. But, we could just not have to be housing a load of people who've got no right to be here. There's a thought. Andrew, we also want to talk about the migrant case that involves the Epping sex offender, of course, Calamity Lammy, as he's been dubbed now. David Lammy, the Justice Secretary and Deputy Prime Minister, take questions in the Commons and give a statement. There's going to be an independent inquiry, blah, blah, blah. Personal error, an individual's error probably, but it is interesting. The Reform UK MP Danny Kruger, he went over from the Tories to Reform recently. He and Reform's head of policy Zia Youssef holding a press conference another day. Another Reform press conference, really. This time it's on the civil service reform we were talking about earlier. And Zia Youssef has just said if anyone was in any doubt that Britain needed reform, then you needn't look any further than the Epping migrant case. And this is the thing. I don't think anyone's even surprised by this. I mean, the Epping migrant case emerged on Friday after on Thursday, the one-in, one-out deal emerged when somebody had returned and then come here, been sent back, and then returned, and now we're going to have to send it back again. And by the way, we pay for all of this. I mean, absolute laughable, doing the hokey-cokey migrant. And then the next day, it got even more mad, a high-profile illegal migrant who had sexually assaulted a 14-year-old, sparking all those protests outside, not just the Bell Hotel at Epping, but across the country, as you mentioned, in Canary Wharf and elsewhere. That he was accidentally let out when he was going for about an hour and a half outside of prison. I think I'm supposed to be deported. Where am I supposed to go?
No, and the fact that it fell to him to try and correct that mistake tells you everything you need to know, don't you? I mean, this is a man who should never have been let in and who should never have been let out, and yet this is the British state now. It's so useless and it's so dysfunctional that it's become a genuine menace to public safety, both in terms of not being able to control a border, but also not being able to run your own criminal justice system in an effective fashion. So it's one of those things where, even though human error does happen, and but it's been happening an awful lot in the prison service.
And it's doubled. The 262 people have been wrongly released as opposed to 125, 130 last year.
Exactly, which is surely, you know, more than what you should expect. So human error does happen, but I think this has become symbolic of that broader issue, which is that nothing works, and that nothing works to the detriment of the safety of the people who live here. And as long as people have that in front and centre and in their minds, I think reform as the kind of change agents party in the next election will do very well.
And public safety is absolutely the key. And again, we keep being told, oh, it's very racist to say these men are potential sex offenders. Well, apart from all the ones who are, I'm not saying every single person arriving on our shores illegally is a sex offender, but we know they're a criminal. We already know that bit. But if they're coming from countries, as we know they are, which are either war-torn or have at the very least medieval attitudes towards justice, towards women and girls, gay men and women, and and all the rest of it. I mean, I'm sorry, I don't know why we would be surprised. Sweden, Germany have both had widespread campaigns, literally having posters and TV campaigns and things to actually explain to their huge migrant arrivals, because how's that worked out for them? Really badly since 2015. The public is very clear about that. You see what's happening in their politics. But basically the massive rise in crime, huge explosion in sex crimes in Sweden, off the scale compared to there were virtually no reported rapes in the capital until the mass arrival of migrants from a particular part of the world. People can complain about this. This is borne out by the official statistics in terms of where people are from, and the fact that you've got a load of young men arriving who have completely different attitudes, and they've had to have these campaigns basically saying you're not allowed to touch women. You can't. It's not acceptable for you to touch women just because they're not covered up. They're literally having to tell these men this because they don't know it. And
it's weird that people, in the West, in the countries that have been affected by this migration, pretend not to know that this is the case either. Like, many people will go on.
All cultures are the same, Tom.
And again, it's not to say that people can't integrate. It's not to say that there aren't things that change over time, of course. It's not to say that you shouldn't, it's not that they're any less human beings. They just have different attitudes, and we tend to think that our attitudes are superior. But, people have gone on, maybe a little weekend away to Marrakesh. If you're a young woman not covered up, you know what happens. It's one of those things where we kind of have to pretend that these things aren't the case when it comes to migration. And it's similarly, as you say, excuse me, it's not to say that you damn everyone or you tar everyone with one brush, but in the same way that you don't leave your door open at night, it doesn't mean...
I think that everyone's a burglar.
Exactly. You don't do that because you don't trust your neighbours. You don't do that because you think everyone out there is potentially meaning to do you harm. It's just you're allowing the one or two individuals who wouldn't mind taking your stuff or doing you harm a very easy go of it. That's exactly what you do when you don't control your borders either. This is so obvious to, I think, anyone with even a modicum of common sense.
And again, this is the same reason of why, for instance, women don't want men who claim to be women in their bedrooms, in their toilets, in their changing rooms. Not because every single trans person is a sex offender or every single man is a sex offender. It's because too many of them are, and therefore we're playing the odds. And also we don't know which ones are, which ones aren't, but we can make a really good guess that the average woman isn't going to be a sex offender, so we're safe with them. I mean, we do this we do this at nightclubs. For goodness sake, nightclubs have policies. No stag do's. They now say no hen do's, ladies. We've been upping our game on that front. Well done in terms of vomiting everywhere and causing mayhem in a nightclub. Large groups of men not allowed into a nightclub. Without women, because they know that men in large groups tend to behave more badly than men who are with women. Okay, they play the odds. We play the odds in criminality all the time. But when I walk down the street, someone said to me, I remember years back, oh, so if you see a bunch of and they said, black youths wearing hoodies and stuff on the street corner, you're going to cross the street. I'm like, of course I would. But I would do the same whether they were white youths or black youths, and I would do the same whether they were girls or boys now, because frankly a load of our teenagers are feral from every background, gender and everything. So I mean, but you play the odds. I mean, and that's what you do in everyday life. That's what women do every day when they walk down the street at night. And it's what you do when you say, oh, who shall I have look after my child? Oh, someone who's just left prison for a sex offence but says that they're absolutely not a danger. Or that nice young woman with no record. Oh, I don't know. Which shall I go for? You play the odds, and we're playing the odds really badly with our young women's and our girls' lives by having a load of, fighting age young men from largely, let's be honest, medieval societies where, women have no rights, where a woman who is not covered up is basically fair game. And I've been in countries like Egypt many, many times, and I know the way I am treated, or the way my daughter is treated when there is a man with us, when my husband is with us, is completely different. It's completely different. And the same member of staff in a Western hotel. And I'm sorry, people can go, oh, that's terrible. Sorry, you know, I've actually had to say on a day that my husband was off on a scuba boat without us, I literally had to say, leave us alone. Leave us alone. You know, we actually, you know, we could, and I don't have to do that in London. Yeah, I don't. But anyway, look, Danny Kruger has been speaking, the Reform MP who came over from the Tories at this press conference about their latest reforms. He says basically, we will be ready, he says, on day one. When Nigel Farage walks into number 10, I want him to sit the civil servants down and tell them what to do. We'll have new civil service legislation ready to go, drafted from day one. We'll bring more expertise and advice from outside Westminster to help in Whitehall. We'll reform the civil service code. And under a reformed government, the civil service is under notice and the number of civil servants will fall from 500,000. He hasn't given a number what it would fall to, but it's massively ballooned since about 10 years ago. We'll take back control of the Whitehall machine. We'll not let bogus and higher appeals get in the way of Parliament. And so he's setting up advisory groups, and if you want to get involved, get involved. I mean, I've got to be honest with you, what's not to like about this? I'd support any government saying they were going to do this.
No, exactly, and it's one of those things which is encouraging because they are now attracting figures like Danny Kruger, who just give a slightly different flavour, who have a hell of a lot of
sort of
experience.
Backbone.
Yeah, and it's not, I don't want to fetishise that too much anyway, because it sounds almost like you do need that kind of more populist campaigning element, but they've got that in spades already. Yeah. I think this is an interesting shift that is taking place, where it's like we need to do more policy, we need to be able to present it credibly. Obviously, all of these plans will be tested to destruction if they ever get a chance to run the country, but it's still one of those things where it's hard to see many people getting too upset about this. I think everyone understands that the British state just doesn't work.
Yeah.
And that the civil service
because we live here, we can see it, eyes and ears. Yeah. 11:20.